You are not your past. Let that settle for a second. Because I know some of you just nodded in agreement. But inside, you're still holding on to the weight of things that happened years ago. You wear it like armor. Like it's the price you pay for still being here. But I'm here to tell you that's not who you are. That's just where you've been. See, one of the greatest lies we buy into is that our identity is determined by our history. That our mistakes, our environment, even our trauma somehow define us. But if that were true, growth wouldn't be possible. Change would be fiction. Redemption wouldn't exist. And yet, everywhere you look, in stories, in people, in your own life, you see it, the undeniable power of transformation. That's because your past is not a prophecy. It's a record, not a sentence. Think about this. You are the only person alive who has complete access to your entire story. The behind, the scenes, the private chapters, the footnotes nobody else sees. And too often, we use that access to shame ourselves. We replay scenes on a loop, our failures, our regrets, until we start to believe that's all there is. But here's the truth: memory is not fact. Memory is filtered through emotion, through bias, through time. The story you tell yourself about your past is just that, a story. Which means you can revise it. You can extract the wisdom and leave the pain behind. You can choose which parts you carry forward. That choice, to reinterpret rather than relive, is one of the most powerful acts of freedom available to us. Now, I'm not saying forget what happened. We don't grow by pretending. But there's a difference between learning from the past and living in it. Some of us have built homes in our history. We know the layout of our old pain better than we know the possibilities of our future. And what happens is, the longer we stay there, the more we start confusing familiarity with truth. Just because something has always been a certain way, doesn't mean it's meant to stay that way. Let me be real with you: pain will teach you. But it was never meant to lead you. If your decisions today are being made from wounds instead of wisdom, then you're not rewriting your story. You're just rereading the same chapter, hoping for a different ending. You ever notice how people say, "That's just who I am"? Like it's a full stop. Like it's the final word on their identity. But what they're really saying is, that's who I've been allowed to be so far. That's who I became in response to what happened to me. That's who I became to survive. But survival mode is not your forever mode. At some point, you have to shift from surviving your life to creating it. Psychologists will tell you that we develop much of our identity in childhood, in response to the people around us, the roles we're expected to play. And unless we actively challenge those narratives, we keep acting them out long after they've served their purpose. This is what Carl Jung was getting at when he said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Some of you are still living out scripts that were handed to you when you were too young to question them. And now's the time to put the pen in your own hand. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are not defined by what you didn't know back then. You're here, listening, reflecting, which means you are ready. And readiness isn't about having it all figured out. It's about being willing to see yourself differently. Not through the lens of your wounds, but through the lens of your worth. Here's the paradox: the moment you stop clinging to your old identity, the one built from shame, failure, insecurity, you don't lose who you are. You finally meet who you really are. And you realize, maybe for the first time, that you were never the pain, never the failure, never the mistake. You were the one who carried it, who survived it, who's still standing. And that matters. Because once you see that you are not your past, the future stops looking like a punishment and starts looking like a promise. You stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, "What now?" You stop waiting for someone to come rewrite your story, and start becoming the author of your next chapter. Don't get me wrong, rewriting isn't easy. It takes honesty. It takes discipline. It takes courage to admit you've outgrown the story you've been telling yourself. But it's worth it. Because the moment you decide to stop letting your past run your life is the moment your future begins. Not tomorrow, not next year, today. So if you take nothing else from this moment, take this. The past may explain you, but it does not excuse you, and it definitely doesn't have the right to define you. There comes a moment in everyone's life when you have to decide who's holding the pen. You either live a life that's been written for you, by fear, by other people's expectations, by circumstances, or you take the pen back and say, "This story is mine now." We live in a world that's constantly trying to tell us who we are. From the time we're young, Labels get handed out like business cards: too quiet, too loud, too sensitive, too stubborn, too much of this, not enough of that. And if we're not careful, we start collecting those labels and calling them identity. We start building our self-worth around how well we meet someone else's definition of us. But here's the truth. Other people only ever get to see a chapter, maybe a paragraph of your life. You are the only one who's been there for the whole thing. Which means you are the only one qualified to define your narrative. Not based on what's happened to you, but based on what you're willing to do with it. Taking ownership of your story means being brutally honest with yourself. It means acknowledging that while you may not be responsible for what happened to you, you are responsible for what happens next. That's a tough pill to swallow, I know. It's much easier to point outward, to blame the job that fired you, the parent who failed you, the system that overlooked you. And listen, those things are real. I'm not here to downplay injustice or struggle. But I am here to say staying stuck in blame doesn't build power, it builds bitterness. And bitterness will rot the foundation of your future. The philosopher Viktor Frankl, who survived the horrors of a Nazi concentration camp, once said, "Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms: to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances." That man lost everything: family, freedom, dignity, and still, he found the strength to say, "They can control my body, but they can't control my mind." That is ownership. That is power. You see, when you give away authorship of your story, you also give away your agency. You start living reactively instead of intentionally. You move through life responding instead of choosing, and eventually, you start to believe that you don't have a say anymore, that life just happens to you. But life doesn't just happen. You happen to life. Owning your story means you don't wait for the perfect moment to start rewriting. You start right where you are, with the raw material of now. It doesn't matter if you feel unprepared. Growth doesn't wait for you to feel ready. Most breakthroughs come wrapped in discomfort. They show up when you're stretched, when you're uncertain, when you finally decide that staying the same is more painful than changing. And let me tell you something important. Taking ownership doesn't mean pretending you've got it all figured out. It means taking radical responsibility even when you don't. It means asking better questions. Not, "Why is this happening to me?" But, "What am I supposed to learn here?" Not, "What do they think of me?" But, "What do I think of myself when no one's watching?" That internal shift, from passive observer to active participant, is how you move from surviving your story to shaping it. From narrating pain to redirecting purpose. Now, some of you might be thinking, "But what if I've already wasted too much time?" Let me stop you right there. Wasted time doesn't disqualify you from writing a better story. In fact, the pages you regret might just become the most powerful part of your message, not because of the pain, but because of what you decided to do with it. Nobody rewrites their life by erasing the hard parts. They rewrite it by turning pain into perspective and perspective into purpose. And purpose only comes when you reclaim authorship. Look at the most impactful people in history. The ones whose stories shaped the world. They weren't perfect. They weren't without failure or struggle. But what they were, consistently, was intentional. They chose their values. They chose their focus. They chose their response. That's what made them unstoppable. Not talent, not privilege, not luck, ownership. And the truth is, most of us aren't being held back by our circumstances. We're being held back by our story about those circumstances. If you keep telling yourself, "I always mess things up," guess what? You'll live a life that reinforces that belief. Not because it's true, but because you'll subconsciously make choices that align with it. That's not fate. That's just an unexamined script. Psychologically, this is what we call a cognitive loop. Your thoughts shape your behavior, and your behavior reinforces those same thoughts. It becomes a cycle. The only way to break that loop is to question it. To stand back and ask, whose voice is that in my head? Who told me I had to stay in this role? And why am I still agreeing with them? You can't rewrite what you won't confront. It takes courage to question your own narrative. It takes maturity to admit that maybe, just maybe, you've been playing it small because small feels safe. But let me tell you, there is nothing safe about shrinking yourself. You weren't built to live in the margins of your own life. You weren't built to follow someone else's script. You were built to lead, to evolve, to rewrite. And rewriting starts with ownership. Ownership says, no one else is coming to fix this. And that's not a tragedy, it's a gift. Because once you realize that you are the one you've been waiting for, you stop chasing permission and start stepping into power. So I'm asking you right now, are you holding the pen? Or are you letting fear, doubt, and past versions of yourself write the next chapter? It's never too late to take it back. And the moment you do, your story changes, not because the past disappears, but because the present begins to matter more than your excuses. Because the truth is simple, you don't get to choose what happened before, but you do get to choose what happens next. And that choice, that's where your power lies. Let me tell you something most people don't realize. The way you speak to yourself is the most powerful script you will ever write. And I don't just mean yourself, talk in passing, the random thoughts that float in and out during the day. I'm talking about the language you use to frame your reality. The words you repeat to yourself, silently or out loud, about who you are, what you deserve, and what you believe is possible. They are shaping your behavior, your choices, and your future whether you realize it or not. This isn't just motivation. This is neuroscience. The brain doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's vividly imagined or constantly repeated. That's why affirmation works. That's why belief systems, even false ones, feel true. Because your brain is wired to follow the language you feed it. If you constantly say, I always fail, your brain doesn't argue. It adapts. If you say, I'm not the kind of person who can do that, your brain agrees and starts filtering the world to reflect that narrative. That's called confirmation bias. And it's one of the strongest forces in human psychology. So if you want to rewrite your story, you have to rewrite your language. You can't create a new life with the vocabulary of limitation. Start listening to the way you describe yourself, especially when no one else is around. Listen to what you say when you're frustrated, when you mess up, when you're afraid. Are your words building your future or reinforcing your past? Are you speaking like someone who believes they have the authority to change, or like someone resigned to staying the same? Too many people speak defeat over their lives like it's casual conversation. I'm just not good at relationships. I'm always tired. Nothing ever works out for me. You hear this every day, and most folks say it with a laugh, like it's no big deal. But it is a big deal. Because your subconscious mind is always listening. And it doesn't take things lightly. It takes them literally. The philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein once said, "The limits of my language mean the limits of my world." In other words, if you can't speak something into possibility, you probably won't live it into reality. That's how powerful your internal dialogue is. And here's the thing, your inner voice, it's not a fact, it's a habit. And habits can be rewritten. When you start to shift your language, you begin to shift your outcomes. Not overnight, not magically, but intentionally. You start catching yourself before you say, I can't, and you change it to, I haven't yet. That one word, yet, opens a door in your mind. It tells your brain there's still room for growth, still space for progress. You stop saying, I'm stuck, and instead say, I'm in transition. That reframe doesn't just sound different, it feels different. One is a dead end, the other is a path forward. Language is perspective, and perspective is power. Let me give you something practical. Start naming yourself according to your potential, not your past. Say what you intend to become. Call yourself disciplined, even while you're still building the habit. Call yourself courageous even when your voice shakes. Speak your future like it already belongs to you. Not because you're lying to yourself, but because you're training yourself. That's what athletes do. That's what high performers do. That's what leaders do. They don't just react to their emotions. They direct their inner dialogue. Because they understand that language isn't decoration. It's direction. And let me say this. This isn't about positive thinking, just for the sake of being positive. This is about building a vocabulary that aligns with your vision. If your language is rooted in fear, your life will be too. If your words echo your doubts, your decisions will follow them. But if your language speaks to strength, even when you feel weak, you're building a bridge between who you are and who you're becoming. There's something deeply philosophical in this, too. The ancient Stoics believed that language was how you discipline the mind. That when chaos hits, and it will hit, the way you talk to yourself can either create peace or deepen the storm. You may not control every circumstance, but you can always control your narrative. Always. We see this in recovery, in healing and reinvention. Every major life change starts with a shift in how we speak about it. You go from saying, this broke me, to, this built me. You go from saying, That failure ended everything. 2. That failure taught me everything. Same event, different story, different language. That's not denial. That's wisdom. That's power. The question now is, what story are you reinforcing with your words? And more importantly, who gave you the language you're using? Did you choose it, or did someone hand it to you a long time ago and you never questioned it? Maybe it was a parent, a teacher, a friend who didn't believe in you. Maybe it was your own fear, disguised as reason. Whatever it was, you have the right, and the responsibility, to change it. Start small. Replace just one disempowering phrase with something truthful and useful. Instead of saying, "I always mess this up," say, "I'm still learning how to get this right." That subtle shift can start to rewrite the entire script. Because once you change the language, you change the lens. And when you change the lens, the whole world starts to look different, not because it changed, but because you did. So let me leave you with this: speak like the person you're becoming. Because one day, your words will become your world. Let's get one thing straight: you don't have to wait till you feel ready to start changing your life. That's the myth too many people buy into. That transformation is some grand event. Some moment when the stars align and the fear disappears and the plan is perfect. But here's what they don't tell you: that moment rarely comes. The people who change their lives don't wait for clarity. They act in the presence of doubt. They move even when the fear is still loud. They don't wait for courage to show up. They build it by showing up themselves. The truth is, your future isn't waiting for a better version of you. It's waiting for a braver version of you. And that version begins with what you do today. Action isn't the result of confidence. It's the path to it. You act, you stumble, you learn, and you grow. You don't get a shortcut around it. You have to go through the work, through the uncertainty, through the repetition. But once you commit, once you say, "This version of my story ends here," you've already started the re-perfect. Not when it's easy, but now. Because now is the only moment that's real. The past is memory, the future is concept. But now is where change lives. People spend years looking for the right time to start over. But let's be honest, the right time rarely looks like a green light. It usually looks like resistance, like fear, like discomfort. But that's the sign you're standing at the edge of transformation. Every major breakthrough in life starts with a decision to act before you have all the answers. There's a philosophy behind this. One rooted in Stoicism and echoed in modern psychology. The idea that action is the antidote to fear, that you don't think your way into a new life. You act your way into it. You don't wait until you're fearless to take the first step. You take the step with the fear. And every time you do, the fear loses a little bit of its power. Psychologically, we call this exposure. You face the thing that scares you, little by little, and your brain rewires itself. You begin to realize that fear is not a signal to stop. It's a signal to pay attention, to proceed with awareness, not avoidance. There's a line from Denzel Washington that I've always carried with me: ease is a greater threat to progress than hardship. Let that sink in. Because what most people want is ease, comfort, familiarity. But what builds character, what builds real change, is movement through difficulty. You can't grow in a space where you're not being stretched. The muscle doesn't grow without resistance. The story doesn't change without action. The life you want isn't built in theory. It's built in behavior. You might be wondering, what if I fail? And that's fair. But let me ask you this: what if you don't? What if you take the risk and it works? What if the decision you've been hesitating to make, to leave the job, to start the business, to speak your truth, is the very decision that shifts everything? And even if you stumble, you learn. You evolve, gain clarity. You don't lose by trying. You lose by waiting so long that the moment passes you by. Fear is loudest right before the leap. Doubt always shows up before the breakthrough. That's not a warning. It's confirmation you're getting close to something real. The people who rewrite their stories don't have fewer fears. They just stop giving fear the final vote. They understand that hesitation is expensive. Every time you delay action, you reinforce the story that you're not capable, that you need more time, that you're not ready. And the longer you repeat that story, the harder it becomes to break. But it's a story. And stories can be edited. Right here. Right now. Let's talk about discipline for a moment. Because this isn't just about bold moves and motivational surges. This is about daily decisions. Quiet commitments. The stuff no one sees. Discipline is the bridge between inspiration and transformation. It's not about being perfect. It's about showing up consistently, even when you don't feel like it. You want to change your life? Start by changing your habits. You don't need to leap the whole staircase. Just take the next step. Drink the water. Make the call. Do the work. Stop negotiating with the old version of yourself, who only knew how to cope. You're learning how to create. And it begins not with grand gestures, but with small, intentional acts repeated over time. That's where momentum is born. Think about any great story you've ever read. The hero doesn't wait for certainty. They step into the unknown. They say yes when everything inside them is afraid. And that decision, that action, is what transforms them. The same is true for you. You're not going to rewrite your story just by visualizing it. You're going to rewrite it by living it. By making choices today that are aligned with where you're going, not where you've been. That means saying no to old habits. That means walking away from roles you've outgrown. That means showing up when it's easier to stay hidden. You want a new outcome. You need new behavior. You need aligned action. Not someday, not when things settle down, but today. Because every day you delay is a day you reinforce the old story. And every day you take action, even the smallest step, is a day you lay bricks for the new one. You don't have to be fearless. You just have to be willing. You don't have to do it all at once. You just have to begin. Because when you act, when you move, when you show up, when you speak, when you choose, you tell your mind, your body, and your spirit, this is who I am now. And that, not your fear, not your past, becomes your truth. So I'll leave you with this: your life doesn't change when you get more time. It changes when you decide that now is enough. Because it is. And so are you. Let's bring it all home. You've heard the truth, not dressed up in fantasy, not sugar-coated for comfort, but spoken clearly, with the weight it deserves. And now the question isn't whether you can rewrite your story. The question is, will you? We've uncovered the myths. That your past defines you. It doesn't. That your story belongs to someone else. It doesn't. That your words don't matter. They do. That change comes later. It doesn't. It starts now. It starts with presence. With ownership. With a decision. You are not a victim of your old story. You are the author of a new one. No more waiting for permission. No more blaming the past. No more rehearsing failure like it's part of your identity. That chapter is closed. The next one begins when you say so. And don't confuse starting over with erasing everything. You're not here to delete who you've been. You're here to integrate it, to learn from it, to use it. Every scar, every lesson, every wrong turn. They're not your shame. They're your tools. They are the raw material of your rise. So, as you walk out of this moment, I want you to carry one thing: your story is not finished. And you are the one holding the pen. Write wisely, write boldly, but above all, write now.